weren't so concerned with, but which nevertheless dramatically and capriciously escalated the Vietnam War that claimed nearly 60,000 American lives, and which was furthermore based on ambiguous evidence of an American naval vessel being threatened by the North Vietnamese, passed in 2 days. In the plotting world of Capitol Hill, 2 days is the bat of an eyelash. What does this mean? Professor Schultz asked. It means that, for better or for worse, often the most critical decisions in U.S. foreign policy are made at the elite level, without much input from public opinion. The themes from this lesson resurrect themselves time and time again in the study of foreign affairs. How often have we seen the United States become bogged down in a fruitless or detrimental diplomatic quandary because of questionable decisions made by federal officials, or because private interests inappropriately influence the conduct of foreign policy? Public confidence in our most inveterate institutions, such as Congress and the judiciary, is at its lowest point in decades, and our morals as a nation have been questioned abroad. Indeed, in an increasingly interconnected world, U.S. leadership has ebbed in a time when it should be flourishing. Now, this is some pretty lofty rhetoric coming from a 22-year-old whose most lasting accomplishment was surviving last night. That notwithstanding, I feel that there are valuable lessons and implications to be gained from an objective understanding of foreign policy in the 21st century. We here at Stanford have been blessed with the opportunity to be those elites who can absolutely affect changes in the lives of numerous Americans. Regardless how many of us choose to go into policy, or business, or academia, or any other field, we have the capacity to improve the world we live in, largely by virtue of having attended and eagerly grasped the opportunities available in this great institution. We are truly fortunate in that our educational experiences here in this department have given us a head start to what comes next, and we should dive right in. Perhaps the most valuable piece of advice I received before coming to Stanford was that if I was going to be lucky, I would have to make my own luck. In my opinion, there is no such thing as destiny. Our lives are what we make of them. It's easy, well, kind of, to wake up in the morning, go to class, do your homework, study for exams, and graduate with flying colors. What isn't so easy is taking the initiative to get outside of the academic wall, to lay everything out on the line for what you believe in, and to manage the hurdles that life invariably sends at us. Back in high school, I was fortunate in that I never really experienced a taste of defeat, failure. Sports teams, musical auditions, and the college admissions process treated me quite nicely, as I'm sure many of you can relate to. But that all changed when I came to Stanford and got that first letter of rejection from the seminar class I really wanted in on. Then, for the scholarship I just had to have, and so forth. Looking around at the impressive individuals with me today, it's easy to see why I wasn't in campus anymore. Walt Whitman once said, "Have you heard that it is good to gain the day? I also say it is good to fall. Battles are lost in the same spirit in which they are won." To me, these words resonate all too clearly. Overcoming adversity and failure was at once the most wretched and the most precious lesson I learned here at Stanford. Those rejection letters and paper rewrites and marathon all-nighters in Meyer Library are difficult to swallow for anyone, but they don't mean anything if we don't use them to our advantage. From what I gather, life is long and precipitous, and as much as we would like to imagine to the contrary, we are still young, inexperienced, and fresh out of the starting gate. And we must fall if we are to learn to get back up. Which brings me back to an earlier point. As college students, we have been forced to make our own luck. I would never have the job that I am fortunate to have been offered if I had never swallowed my pride and gone into Professor Larry Diamond's office one day to admit that my thesis research wasn't coming as well as I had anticipated. And as for that naive infatuation with Washington I developed years ago, I never would have come to appreciate the federal government, despite its flaws and inefficiencies, if I hadn't worked in Washington and experienced it for myself, or traveled and researched in other countries to see how dreadful the human condition should be. 2 years ago, I found myself standing on the garbage-strewn beach of Omotepe Island in the middle of filthy Lake Nicaragua. My purpose in going to the island was to climb the Concepcion volcano and live to tell the tale. As it turned out, Omotepe was indelible for a completely different reason. As the sun set on the water late one evening, I stumbled upon a tattered favela, or slum. shredded trash bags were makeshift roofs. Pieces of razor-sharp sheet metal sheltered children from the wind, and mothers threw pitchers of water on the sand to keep the dust at bay. After chatting with toothless old men and playful children, I turned to leave the slum and saw an image that I'll never forget. A young girl with visible mental and physical disabilities, wearing grimy white rags, sat calmly in a hammock, watching the sunset over the lake. As I approached her, she turned to me and smiled, then laughed. Tears welled in my eyes, and my heart was filled with bitterness at the deplorable conditions these people were forced to live in. But at the same time, I felt overjoyed that despite such conditions, these people and this little girl remained optimistic in the face of inequity. I passionately believe that we have an altruistic obligation as the intelligent, privileged young people that we are, not necessarily to the people whom I just mentioned, but to ourselves and to those around us. We Stanford graduates are some of the most fortunate people in the world and have been given an uplifting opportunity to do good. For me, as for many of you, I owe all of my comforts and my Stanford education to the sweat and blood of my forebears who built railroads and laid brick so that I might have a better life. I am the product of my ancestors' toil, and to fail in utilizing my inspiring opportunity to improve those of others would be to do my ancestors and myself a great injustice. There is no luck. Life is what we make of it. And I'm confident that if we here all resolve to make the world better for our children, then we might even improve the silent lives of those we never see, like the little girl on the Ortega Island. Well, if this speech didn't do the trick, then I may never be able to explain to my old man why I study this fascinating social science. But he and my mom, both teachers of the real science, stand by me nonetheless. So to my parents, and to all the parents in the audience here today, I hope that someday we may be able to repay for the opportunities you have given us over these last 4 years. We only ask that you wait a few more before you start to cash in. Thanks very much.